Welcome to the Battle Ready podcast. I am Aaron McManus, joined by my father.
Father, you're being very formal today.
I am being very formal today.
I thought I was your dad.
You are my dad.
All right. Well, I'm Erwin McManus.
Yes.
And so excited about this next episode of Battle Ready.
I'm very excited about this episode of Battle Ready. Let's just dive in.
All right, because
Yes.
I am absolutely excited that the NBA is back. In fact, yesterday, your mom, my wife, Kim, was unhappy with me because she didn't see me all day because I was in my back house watching games nonstop, and she basically was boycotting my addiction. And I've just been fascinated by why some players and some teams are thriving in the bubble and why others are not doing well as individuals or as teams.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
Well, the bubble is a perfect social experiment on the ability to deal with pressure. Because there are some people who are thriving in the bubble and others who are having...
We're just going to say it right now. The Lakers aren't what they used to be.
They're having trouble.
They're having trouble in the bubble.
And in fact, I was looking at...
But honestly, Clippers are as well. The Clippers aren't the same. The chemistry is not the same. Montrezl Harrell is coming back, but...
No, he's back. But
it is an interesting, right, like what you were saying, it's interesting experiment.
But I think you're attaching greatness that's in development, Clippers, and greatness that is underachieving with the Lakers.
Oh, man. So for all of our Lakers fans, we love both teams.
We do, but here's the issue. I think I just saw this statistic. I think it was like...
But the same way that God loved Cain and Abel different.
1,080 different iterations of starting fives or playing fives.
Yes.
And of all the 1,000+ iterations, the Laker five have the lowest plus minus of any players in the NBA. And I'm only saying this because the Lakers are the number one team in the West, and they have the greatest player in our time with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, who could equally be considered the best player in the NBA, and they're underachieving. And they were doing so well before they got to the bubble. And then you have the anomalies, like, was it TJ
Warren with the Pacers,
who has had 50+ games, points a game. And
is it Nanu with Toronto, who's that Brazilian guy?
Mm-hmm.
With Philadelphia, who scored 17 last night.
Oh, wow.
Or a couple nights ago. Yeah.
Okay. No, I haven't kept up with him, but I have kept up with, is it Devin Booker?
Devin Booker is 9-1.
And who the Suns are 7-0, undefeated in the bubble. Or
7-0, yeah, 7-0, yeah.
And then you have other players who are just absolutely excelling in the bubble. Even Kawhi looks very comfortable in the bubble.
Right.
Whenever he wants to, he can just turn it on.
So what do you think it is?
I think there's a lot going on. And you hear some of it, like I think in one of the interviews or something that LeBron said, well, there's a lot more going on here than what's going on in the court. Yeah. And that's exactly right. That all sports are psychological in the end. Because yes, the differential between high school and college and pro is that there are filters of talent. That talent basically ends your career in high school. Talent may end your career in college. But there comes a certain point where in your world, everyone is of somewhat equal talent. And now it becomes a mental game. Now the difference is psychological. It's not about who can jump the highest or run the fastest. I mean, you look at, is it Luka?
Luka Doncic?
Yeah.
The Dallas Mavs.
Yeah. You try to break him down into physiology. He's not that fast. He doesn't seem to be able to jump that high. He doesn't seem to have only lean muscle mass.
Right.
And yet he is absolutely thriving.
Yeah.
And he's an extraordinary player. And he seems to thrive in the bubble. He seems to thrive under pressure.
What do you think it is that makes the difference? Under pressure, in the bubble, same circumstances. We talked about this before this happened. We think that the Clippers will do better because Kawhi is an introvert and doesn't actually need the fans. Not that he doesn't like the fans, but he doesn't have an Instagram. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a black hole when it comes to media. He barely talks in interviews. And then you've got LeBron, who is the spotlight is always on him. He's the kind of
the greatest show,
the greatest showman. He's at the Lake Show. He's this could be his third championship with a third team, like 3 different champion. No, I'm saying is his fourth championship.
It would be his fourth.
Be his fourth, but with a third team.
With a third team.
Right, and then you have Kawhi Leonard, who won last year with Toronto Raptors, and now he's coming to the
before
Clippers.
the Spurs, so this would be his third championship with a third team.
Do you think it's because this is going to be an interesting parallel? So this is not a sports podcast.
No, but sports are a great
close.
Microcosm of life.
But here we go. Do you think LeBron's greatness is due? Of course, he has an athletic ability. He's incredible. But do you think he's slowing down and unable to achieve what he has been able to achieve in the past, and even just this year and this season, because he doesn't have the same fan base watching him, encouraging him? He does it for the show. He does it for the entertainment. He's a gladiator.
Well, you asked me, what do I think it is? And if I had to reduce it to one word, I would say resilience.
No, what I asked you was, do you think he's doing it because...
No, at first you said, what is
Then you didn't
the
answer
difference?
it, so then I asked it differently.
And so I'd say that
now
the first thing
answer the thing I asked.
I go back
second.
and say that we need to study resilience.
Okay, but do you think it has to do with the fact that he doesn't have fans in front of him?
Yes, because it also has to do with energy. That it's not necessarily even just about what people would say like ego. It has to do with energy. Some players are motivated and energized by the crowd. They're energized by the spectator. They're energized because they want to be in the limelight. They want to be seen, and it enriches their life to feel as if they've entertained.
The reason why I'm kind of sticking you to this train of thought, because I want to like parallel that to right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there are companies, organizations, influencers, pastors, churches who are struggling because when they're not in front of people, they lose the desire to actually speak?
It's not even losing the desire. It's they're losing their source of energy for their speaking gifts. And because I want to go back. All right, so you're looking at energy. So you look at maybe players like LeBron who are so energized. You can tell that they actually create energy in the room through the fans.
Right.
And then you have people at the other end.
It takes a certain level of gravitas and charisma to be able to pull an arena of 18,000 people, 15,000 people together.
And in our city, we have a perfect study of an extroverted team, the Lakers, and an introverted team, the Clippers.
Yeah, completely branded differently. It's the Lake Show at Staples Center.
Yeah.
And then it is what is
it's
it?
Really
together.
Yeah. It's,
Clippers' whole motto is togetherness, right?
Together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really is almost like the grit show.
The grit show, yeah.
It's not about what people see in the spotlight. It's what you're doing in the streetlights. It's what you're doing every day, and that no one else is seeing. And I don't know who's going to win. It's going to be really fascinating.
The Clippers are going to win.
That to me isn't. Oh yes, I
we have
hope
to commit to predictions because.
Well, I'm committed.
I look back.
Look, I said at the beginning of the season I thought it was going to be Clippers and Celtics.
Right.
So we'll see if I'll hold to that statement, and I'm just going to play that out, ride that out.
I do think that it would be more interesting to watch the Toronto Raptors versus the Clippers just because Kawhi left, and that's just like an incredible story to lose your main player and to still make it to the finals and to make it to that big game. But the Celtics are a better team, and I think it'll be more fun to actually watch them and interesting. So.
Oh, you can't even have this conversation without talking about Dame.
No, but I want to go back.
We got to
stop.
Just
You
throw
keep changing the subject.
some love to Dame right now.
No. Let's go back. No. You keep changing the subject. Do you think tie this into to this world as well?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to. Why don't you want to?
I do. I just wanted to talk a little about the players.
Let's go to Dame. But if you're not into sports, this isn't really applicable right now.
Oh, who's not into sports that listens to us?
Okay, that is true. That's true. I asked someone this week. When you meet someone, you're like, okay. What are the important things when you're going to date somebody, right? And like, do you love God and do you love basketball?
No, what I was going to say about Dame is that it seems to me that what's more important for Dame is that he carries the brand.
Damian Lillard on the Portland Trail Blazers.
Right, who has never left Portland, who believes in the city, who invests in the community, who has become really the brand of the city.
Yep.
And I think that as long as he's wearing that Trailblazer jersey, he's going to try to play at an optimal level.
When he came out this week, someone who was close with Damian Lillard came out after he dropped 61 points against, I'm not entirely sure who he was playing against, dropped 61 points in a game after earlier in the week people had said, it's not Dame time. Damian Lillard isn't gonna be.
That he chokes.
He chokes, and he's had great moments, but there's no way they're gonna make it to the playoffs, into the 8th seed. And his friend came out and basically said that Dame told him he never wants to go to a super team. And he asked him for advice, should I go to a super team? And he's like, what do you want to do? And he's like, I want to beat every super team that ever exists.
Again, the reason I wanted to highlight and take a moment, just kind of look at the topography of it, is that there's so many different personalities on so many different kinds of teams. Some of them are players that were already famous, like Dame, and some that were almost obscure, like TJ, who was traded to the Pacers for money considerations, right?
Yeah.
And
cash
considerations. And he took that as an insult, said, I'm worth more than cash considerations.
Yeah. So which that means, if you don't know basketball, it means they literally traded him from a team, essentially cut him with the trade.
Said he's not worth anything to us.
They said, give us some money if you want for his contract.
All right. So here, let's just break it down for a minute. I said one is resilience, because resilience is really the ability to overcome unexpected pressure.
So these are the mental attributes you need
Yeah.
to succeed inside of under pressure moments.
Right. If you're in the trouble in the bubble moment in your life and you're wondering how to elevate above this.
Right.
And the challenge with resilience is that if you don't have it before the crisis, you're not going to necessarily build it in the crisis.
Okay.
And so you have to choose to build these muscles before you're in the bubble. And that's the thing. You see, the players who are trying to build new muscles in the bubble are not doing as well. The players who built these muscles, these mental muscles, before they got to the bubble, they're thriving. But the two things you can focus on, because I'd say resilience is the long game. The short game is focus and energy. From my observation, the players that are thriving are able to focus and harness their energy. The ones that are not thriving, the teams that are not thriving, haven't been able to master focus in the bubble, and they haven't been able to master energy in the bubble. And so you can hear that in their interviews. You can hear that in the conversations when they say, well, we've never done this before. I've never played in a bubble before. I've never tried to win a championship in a bubble before. I've never played without fans before, as if you're the only one struggling through that.
Yeah.
And the reality is that in the objective reality of competition, you shouldn't complain about anything that every other player is having to go through.
Yeah. Oh, and I think this is an interesting conversation. It's taking us down a cool path, because I also want to talk about distractions.
Right, which is opposite of focus.
Focus and energy will build resilience in the long run.
Very good.
But I also want to talk about distractions, because I feel like the teams who are suffering the most, I would say, also, I think I'm a Clippers fan, but I'm also Clippers' biggest critic. I think we aren't there. Our chemistry is not there. Our offense is okay. We have some incredible players, but unless we get Montrezl Harrell back and Lou Williams on that second team,
and they get that energy, and they get that chemistry back,
we're going to be missing 36 points every game.
And we don't have Beverly, and so
and we don't have that back.
Our pieces haven't come together in the bubble way we hope.
Because there's been lots of distractions. You get all these players that move to the bubble, quarantine for 7 to 10 days, and then everyone left within like the week or two. People were going back home. People were taking care of family issues, funerals.
Other players had worse situations on the outside, and they decided to stay in the
Sean
bubble.
Caruso from the Lakers didn't go to his sister's wedding in Texas because he's like, look, LeBron's pouring everything into this. I'm not going to go back. I'll miss her wedding. It's okay. I'll be okay. So there's this certain level of this ability to just go, okay, I'm going to ignore every distraction in my life. I'm going to focus on this one moment. I'm going to go down this path, and I'm going to watch myself succeed. It's interesting when you listen to people talk who are really successful. There is a certain level of selfishness, which we would call focus and energy in this moment. Right. But there is a certain level of going like, okay, I am going to ignore everyone, not go out at night, not going to talk to my family all the time. I'm not going to go to every movie, every party, every, social event, and I'm going to like lock myself in a room and get better every single day. There's this thing that if you can, but it feels like I say I'm introverted, but I like being around people. And that's one of the things that gets me caught up so much is all the distractions in the world. And then you get to the bubble and we were so focused on ourselves. I was like, okay, now I'm freaked out. and the further we go down, you realize that like, now I have to actually take all this energy and focus it into things that are going to better myself so that when I get out of this, I'm a different person. I'm elevated. I've grown. Right. I don't want to be the same,
And if we could even just use this analogy, The Phoenix Suns are one of the worst teams.
Yeah, they're not going to make the playoffs.
They have one of the worst records in the bubble.
Right.
And they've been undefeated. So I have to wonder to myself, is this a team that has been so underachieving because of their lack of focus?
Right.
And now that they're in the bubble, they're being forced to focus. They've chosen to focus. And now they're actually optimizing their potential. And I wonder how many of us think we're Phoenix Suns in our own talent and ability and capacity, because we've been so distracted that we haven't harnessed our skill and our capacity.
Yeah.
And we blame it on everything else, except that if we would take hold of our opportunity and our potential and our talent, we could actually elevate at an extraordinary level.
Well, and not to pick on LeBron, because I think if this is the thing, you can criticize other people, but really I'm just using them as examples from what they've shared.
Right? You can criticize one of the greatest athletes of all time,
but I'm
because he'll be fine.
But I always think this is funny. Like when people criticize other people in public, especially other people that are public, like if they walked up to you and were like, "I want to be your friend," like would all those critiques stand? No, because I'd be like, "No, I want to be your friend, LeBron. Can we go hang? Can we go hang?"
Yeah,
out?
absolutely,
100%. So when I say like I'm not a Lakers fan, it's really just in the fun of being a sportsman.
Yeah.
If they were like, "Hey, you want to come to a Lakers game?" and they'd be like, "Yes, please. I will burn my Clippers stuff."
No, when both of us would pull
hide
out our secret Lakers gear.
A secret Lakers gear. Yeah, I have the T-shirt and the hat and the jacket chilling in the closet behind the Clippers stuff,
just in case we need it.
But I think it was interesting because LeBron said he's not hiding his phone this year. He's not turning off his phone like he normally does in the playoffs. He's like, because my family's not here, I'm not gonna turn off my phone. There's all this stuff going on in the world, and I was like, I wonder if that's directly connected to this idea that he is distracted, right? Whereas like Kawhi, I don't really know if he's someone who like looks at his phone that often. Obviously, like we're just using these kind of as like, comedic examples, but I do wonder if it's a mental shift of like something that you have to do to focus your energy, to build resilience, to also build this level of competitiveness and focus so that you actually achieve what you want to achieve at the end of the season. Or do we let these things get distracted due to different circumstances in our life? If there's a pandemic in the world, obviously it's going to change how we act and live, but does it change? But if the goal stays the same, why do we let things change us so easily?
All right, so I'm going to ask you then.
Oh gosh.
All right, because these guys, I mean, they're being paid millions of dollars to live in a bubble, to be separated from their families and loved ones and life as they know it.
Yeah.
To achieve a particular goal. And some of them, it seems, are elevating and some are distracted. So what are the things in your life right now that you feel like are distracting you from stepping into the life that you actually just long for yourself?
Yeah. Well, I feel like often, we're gonna go down a hole right now. Distractions. I mean, I think there's a certain level of, I think there's distractions and there's free time.
I think that you're not answering the question.
No, I mean, I think at times when I get distracted, I become self-destructive. Right. I was thinking a lot about this. We talk about, is it depression or is it a lack of discipline? I said that in a few episodes ago. I think in our first episode back.
That's such a great insight.
And now I feel like oftentimes, like I know I'm called and it isn't enough to not pick up the call. Sometimes I have to be so self-destructive that I can't be called anymore. So it's like, if you ever like broken your phone or thrown your phone or just like tried to cut off all communication. And I've tried different things. I unfollowed everyone on Instagram because I just wanted to like kill Instagram in my life for a little bit. I wanted to like remove as many different distractions from my life as I could to be focused. And then I find myself still on Instagram looking at other people's stories, still DMing people, still saying hi to people, still connecting people. People are like, "I thought you're taking a break." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm taking a break, but I'm taking a break from taking a break." And so I think it's like, how do we, I don't know so much about, we get distracted, but then it's like, how do we swing back and like correct it and go, okay, that's a distraction, or this is like maybe a black hole of my time, but how do I stay focused and hone in the energy? Because the more I read, the more it's like, the more I read about how to be high functioning, high achieving, using the most of your intelligence, and then my personality is that like I should work between 6 and 1 p.m. and then I should not do my main job or whatever I'm focused on that day from 1 to like 4 because it isn't actually your most effective hours. I'm more effective from 6 to 10 or 11 p.m. than I am from 1 to 5, but we work these jobs. I don't really work a job that is this. Your schedule is like get it done when you need to get it done and accomplish what you need to get accomplished and go above and beyond. But I do think it is finding what works for you. But if you don't have the freedom to like, you know, I get to make my own hours relatively. I'm on call, but you know, what do you do if you're not able to work within the zone that is like your primary heightened function?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, several things come to mind. The hardest arena of your life to take control of is your mind.
Yes.
And
why?
I think it's the part of us that's most complex. And
okay.
So and I don't want to create like a hierarchy of this, but like if you can take a hold of your mind, everything else will fall into place. But it's the most difficult thing, you know.
And when you say take care of your mind, what do you mean by taking care of it?
And well, you know, in the scriptures it says, take every thought captive.
Yes.
To the obedience of Christ. And for those of us who are followers of Jesus, I go, okay, that's almost an impossible intention, to take every thought captive, because you have 10,000 thoughts and 100,000 almost thoughts, you know, and thoughtlets, and you know, how are you supposed to take them all captive? And I think most of us, if we try to take our thoughts captives, if we're trying to catch every raindrop, we're going to go insane. But what we have to do is we have to harness the rain clouds. And so what that means is, because you're about to say, Dad, what does that mean?
No, I'm not about to say that. I'm about to talk about OCD and high functioning brain patterns.
Yeah.
Highly dysfunctional brain patterns.
Stop trying to take a hold of every little thought and take a hold of what you're thinking about.
That's really good.
Right? Because if you don't choose the direction of your thoughts, you will not be able to navigate the multiplicity of those thoughts.
And that, I think that comes back to this idea of like, how do you focus your energy? How do you focus your thoughts? But sometimes I feel like when I'm I know that when I'm most creative and highest functioning, I'm also the most bizarre mentally. I know that my mind almost works and processes it at a level in which exhausts me so much. Like I was having this joke with a friend who works at a big company, and they said, you're either like so you're on 1,000, or you're ghosting everyone. And I was like, it's true. Like I am like that so much because I think I let things take over, or but also that's part of the joy. It's like, maybe that's the beautiful mind part of my life, where I'm like, when I'm in something, I want to be completely in it.
Right. But so you have to be aware of your emotional, psychological pendulums.
Okay. I want to point this out. He said emotional and he went down. And then he put his hand, he started high, and then went emotional, and he went down really quick.
Because we all have these pendulums.
Okay.
And so if you look at your optimal pendulum, and if you look at your destructive pendulum, like let's say that's the spectrum,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
And
the good versus evil, the yin versus the yang,
there you go. And
the darkness versus light.
You can actually, if you pay attention, begin to identify those patterns that are moving you toward your worst self. And
yes,
if you can identify the ones early enough, you can actually circumvent the extreme negative space.
Do you feel like, sometimes I feel like they're choices that I make, and sometimes I just feel like they're choices that are being made for me?
Right. Whenever you feel like they're choices being made for you, that's when you're destined to go to the negative pendulum, because you've already become powerless.
But what if it about, because like I have a low impulse control, right? Like you talk about like Aaron, you have a low impulse control. You make dumb decisions naturally, and you have to like actually fight the downswing to stay.
I just say don't say your first thought out loud.
In the car, this is some context to this. In the car ride to this podcast, he said we had two conversations. We had a meeting in between the two conversations. And the first conversation, he said, your brain, you think very quickly and you respond even quicker. So you'd think naturally the thing would be think before you speak. Your thing was just think, don't speak. Don't say it all.
I said, whenever you hear something, your brain moves really fast, and so you actually see why it won't work. And so you can demoralize people by immediately telling them why it won't work or why it's a bad idea. And then it can actually make you a dam rather than a river.
So what he said is I've become the leader or the teammate that says no to everything.
Well, what I've said is...
And is that connected to my... I'm trying to cut him off before he breaks me down in front of everyone.
No, what I've said is that you've improved tremendously. And
I don't think
dramatically.
I don't think I have, because we were talking about this. This is how this conversation happened. I don't think he listens to our podcast, but who knows? You did a podcast a week or two ago with Chad Veach, who is awesome.
I love Chad.
He's a pastor based in Los Angeles. And it's funny because when Chad came to LA, there was a few other churches that started roughly around the same time. It was all kind of like within a year. And before, people kind of get really funny because it was weird when everyone started coming to LA, and we were like been in LA forever. But people were like, is it weird that like 5 main pastors started churches in LA at the same time? I was like, no, because like, not the church scene, but like churches in LA kind of like sucked before. It wasn't like especially for being a young person, like there was only like, super Calvinistic, like traditional option and like Mosaic on like the pendulum. There was a lot in between, but there wasn't like unique expressions in the middle. I feel like now that like Chad and Jude and all these great people are here, there's like a really beautiful, like life-giving community of people. It's like, even if you go to a church that isn't us, at least I know you're positive and you're happy. But anyway, that doesn't matter. We brought up Chad because I'm like, Chad is like genuinely the kindest, warmest, nicest person.
So optimistic and encouraging.
And you said your podcast was talking a lot about how Christians could be so negative, some of the most negative people in the world.
Right.
And whenever I get hate online, I find it interesting because it's my friends who don't know God who are like, why are Christians so mean to each other? And it is an interesting observation from people, and it makes us look horrible. But so then I was comparing myself to Chad, and I was like, yeah, because if I was giving a message that Chad gave on like, why are Christians mean? Everyone would be like, everyone makes sense. Like, Chad, you're the kindest person ever. You should tell us to be nicer. If I gave that message of like, hey, why is everybody so mean? They'd be like, hey, Aaron, maybe you should lead by an example and be nicer. And then my dad thought it'd be like really great to just like go for the jugular in that moment as we were turning a corner talking about Chad. And he was like, you know what about that? Like, maybe you should be a little bit less like, don't say everything. And you say like, just don't say no right away.
Right.
And then I get out of the car, go to a meeting with my sister and one of my bosses, Elisa Duran, who's awesome. And then I immediately just start saying no to things to the point where Mariah goes like, could you say something nice? And
no, she said, could you say something positive?
Could you say something positive? And in my head I went, well, apparently not.
No, you said this would be great if.
And I fell apart in that moment. And then we get back in the car. And I was like, man, I really blew that thing that you were talking about earlier. And he said, you know what? Like, you think your mind's like a cheetah, and yet you can't figure out how to put on the brakes quick enough to stop for the next car. You always like end up like slamming on your brakes, and the car goes, and I keep apologizing. Did you get your coffee all over yourself? And all that to say, it's unfocused energy in the wrong direction that causes pendulums to swing, distractions to happen, and choices to be made for me, in which increases my low impulse control. And this is how we are on this podcast.
All right, here's the thing. To get stronger, you have to do more push-ups.
How many more?
No, listen. And if you want to get weaker, you don't have to do less push-ups, just do no push-ups.
Do nothing for longer and you will get weaker.
Yes. But if you want to get stronger, you have to decide to do something. Why do we think it's different with our emotions? Why do we think it's different with our intellect? Why do we think it's different with our soul? If you do nothing, you don't stay the same, you get weaker. If you stop doing something you were doing, and this is what I think sometimes we do it like this, like, God, look at me. I'm reading my Bible, I'm praying, I'm being optimistic, I'm loving people, I'm serving. Yeah. I hope this creates the permanent change that I really want.
Goodness.
And then we stop doing it.
I'm trying.
And then we revert back and we go, wait a minute, nothing changed. They go, it's just like saying you didn't have muscles before. You did have muscles before, but you stopped working out. But you lost the muscles.
But sometimes I just want it to be code. right? Like code I could copy and paste and insert into my, like, the back end of my brain so that I can just, like, Neo, like, hey, I learned how to fly a helicopter in this moment because Morpheus uploaded a program into my skull. Like, God could you please just copy and paste some kindness and some, like, higher impulse control? And could you copy and paste, like, maybe grace and like, and we wouldn't have this conversation because we have this conversation a lot. This also, I think, falls into, like, you know, I used to say this thing, you have to love me for who I am. You have to accept me. This is just who I am. And after maybe a few years, probably decades of me saying that, you finally, it is an ironic statement because we're also very focused on, like, self-improvement and growth and, like, how to mature and how to become more aware of the things going on around you. You said, hey, buddy, I'm just never going to accept you for who you are. I'm going to accept you for the best version of yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And do you remember saying that? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, it's pretty close.
And he always does this when I'm driving, which is odd.
No, I mean, I've always loved you in whatever condition or state you were in.
Right.
But your demand was, you need to accept that this is who I am and this is who I'm always going to be. And I would say, no, I am so glad I have people in my life who always believe in the better of me. And I'm always going to be that person in your life that believes in the best version of you.
So bringing that full swing back to basketball.
Oh, back to the bubble.
Back to the bubble. We can create these emotional, relational bubbles for ourselves, where we are unwilling to admit the fact that even though this is a different situation than what we're normally used to, we've created these, like, social rules for ourselves going, and these reasons, these excuses, these distractions going, you know, life's different right now, so I get to be this way. An anxious mess, a low impulse human, an unkind responder, a lazy worker, a disconnected father or brother or whoever. And you're saying that, and maybe I'm saying it wrong, but you could probably say it better, and I hope you will after this. You're saying that the best teams, the best individuals, the greatest players, regardless of the situation and the bubble and the construct, they will find a way to get rid of all the distractions and hone in on the thing that they're actually trying to achieve and achieve it, despite the million excuses they could make.
Absolutely. I love that. It's a great summary.
So is that it?
No, not at all. I think that, again, let's take this full circle to a way we can apply this right now.
Yeah.
What's sucking out your energy? What are you allowing to steal from you? And the way you can know if your energy is being stolen is that there's a diminishing experience of joy.
What if it, yes, but what if it's just sometimes ourselves?
Yes.
That it isn't other people, or that it isn't other, like, extraneous factors.
Right. And what I would say is the moment you realize that, you're on the way to recovery, because everything around you is just the environment you have to contend with.
Right.
The real bubble is inside of you.
Well, I have this thing, right? Like, we talk about this. We have this an amazing ability as humans to be in the worst relationships in the world, but then when they're over, we only remember the good.
We want them back so bad.
We want them back so bad.
There are actually psychological studies on this.
Right. Yeah. You've brought them to my attention because I'm that person. Like, I'm like, this is the worst relationship. Get me out. And then I get out and I'm like, I loved her. And I hate myself. No, but like, and I say that jokingly, but it's a real thing.
Yeah, but you feel it deeply. But
then I'll come up with all these reasons why it didn't work. But then it will always come back to the fact that maybe I wasn't the healthiest, or I wasn't the person. And that's what makes it really hard, because I'm like, okay, well, if I just fix myself, then it will fix that situation. When we are the problem, how do we focus our energy to not just build resilience, but to actually change the result? So I don't get into the next relationship, the next situation, the next work situation, the next live fight, whatever it is, and actually get a different result. How do I weed those things out? How do I red flag those things in my own self?
Mm-hmm. See, I think that's a really important question. I think on a practical level, relationally, even as you change, you cannot always change enough for the person you're with.
Okay.
And because a lot of times people don't see you for who you're becoming, they see you for who you were.
Okay.
And you have to give yourself the grace to go, we tried and we both need to move into new relationships.
Right.
But then you come into the next relationship, not the same as you went to the last relationship. You go into the next relationship having grown from that relationship so that you're already a different person.
At this rate, I'll be roughly around 60, the rate in which I'll be, able to fully function as a partner in life.
And well, I think that 32 is a great age for you.
But I do think, I think it's a cool conversation to have.
No, I think it's important for so many people, but you have to give yourself, and I go back to the word grace, the grace to believe you're not the same. And humans don't give each other that grace to say, you can grow, you can change, you can be different. But just because people don't, doesn't mean that God doesn't, that we can't give it to ourselves.
Right.
And as much as possible, we should give it to other people as well. And then it's like putting, I've only rock climbed or what is it, the rock wall climbed a few times in my life.
Right.
But what I did know is that you don't ever move, like you basically have 2 arms and 2 legs that you're working with, and you keep one secure. You don't move all 4 at the same time. And so if you put in the peg on your left hand, then you can elevate with your right hand or elevate with your right and left foot. And a lot of times we try to make changes by moving all 4 at the same time, and we go flying downward, crashing. And what you need to realize is, no, growth is incremental. It's 1 peg at a time, and then you move 1 peg at a time, 1 peg at a time. And so instead of beating up on yourself, and I don't mean just you, I'm just anyone listening.
No, this is an autopsy. We're using my life.
And you go, okay, I moved that peg from here to here. I moved that peg, and I've made this progress. I'm growing. I'm becoming a more patient person, a more kind person, a more compassionate person, a more generous person. I mean, there was a season in your life where you would not have been known by generosity, but now you're known as an extraordinarily generous person. Like, to me, you climbed that whole rock wall, and that isn't even a challenge for you anymore. You're so generous, you'd go broke in your generosity.
We're working on that part.
And and so I'm saying is that there are some things in your life that at one time you would not have seen yourself elevating so high.
Yeah.
And you have elevated so high. And I feel like in life, that's what I look at this bubble for the NBA, and that's why I think it's so interesting. There are players that they got in there, and suddenly their focus, their concentration of energy, their mental discipline, which I would call resilience, suddenly translated on the court. And it wasn't just that they were better, others were worse. And all of a sudden, I think there were players who realized, oh, wow, everyone else came in and just assumed they would be less and it would be okay. I'm elevating, and now what's happened is create a differential 2 times over. They didn't just improve by 1 quadrant, others declined by 1 quadrant. And what I'd say is one of the goals in life is to have what's called tough poise. When things get hard, you just choose that those are the moments you get stronger. When everyone goes crazy, that's when you choose to be calm. When everyone gets mean, that's when you choose to be kind. When everyone gets afraid, that's when you choose to be courageous. And if you can make a choice to have this tough poise that says when everything around me starts getting more chaotic and more uncertain and more difficult, I'm going to make small incremental steps to elevate who I am. It's not just that you're raising the bar. The floor is dropping for everyone. So it looks like you're flying. And so I don't think that the necessary ingredients to excel in the bubble is as extraordinary as we think. It's that when people get into crisis, they lower the bar. If you refuse to go down with them, you will soar. You'll be a Devin Booker. You'll be a Dame Lillard.
TJ Warren. TJ Warren is the greatest example of that.
Yeah, you'll be a Phoenix Sun.
Yeah.
And that's what I would hope. And I think one of the challenges is if you're perhaps the best team in the NBA, like the Lakers, with the greatest talents in the world with AD and LeBron James, I think it's actually more challenging because it's easier to lose your foothold and go, darn it, when the world was the way it should be, we were the best and we knew we were going to do this. Now the world has changed and we've lost our advantage. And by the way, one of the great advantages in this is home court. That what's happened in the bubble is that everyone is an away team except for the Orlando Magic.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, because they're playing the bubble in Orlando.
There's only one home team.
Right.
A huge part of sports is that stars can play when they're away. But the team player, the guy who's the support player, he thrives at home. But if the stars mostly thrive at home and they don't thrive when they're in adversarial environments, they're going to have a hard time in the bubble. And so here's a critical thing. Oh, and maybe it attaches so well to the scriptures. If you're living your life for the audience of people, you will not thrive in the bubble. But if you're living your life for the audience of one, of how Jesus sees you and celebrates you, you will thrive in the bubble, because for you, it'll always be a home game, even when it's away in an adversarial environment. And that might be an important lesson to learn.
I love it. I think we should stop right there.
Except,
okay, bonus.
We asked people to send us comments.
We did. So we're going to do kind of a new thing at the end of our podcast. Yeah. New thing. So we set up this email, Aaron@battlereadypodcast.com.
Okay.
And we basically like opened a channel for people to reach out, give us feedback, shoot us ideas for next episodes, kind of just have a conversation. I tried to get back. I got back to like half the emails this week. This week kind of got away from me. But I got a really, really cool email from a guy named Russ.
Hey, Russ.
Hey, Russ. And he actually shot a really long email, which I thought was really cool.
Does Russ say what city he lives in?
He actually doesn't.
Hey, guys, tell us where you're from.
Yeah, tell us where you're from. Most of the people did.
Okay.
But Russ didn't. But he kind of gave, and by long email, it was pretty short, but then he gave like a bunch of different ideas of like things he would love to hear on a podcast with us. And so can we just kind of go into a little bit of his email?
Sure.
I wrote him back a quicker response because I was like, hey, look, we're going to actually do some of this in the podcast. So like I'll just address it in the podcast. But it was really cool to kind of shoot a couple emails back and forth. So thank you to everyone who shot an email to us. And if you haven't responded, I will get back to you this week and shoot emails, and I'm excited. And also share the podcast and rate the podcast on iTunes. Yeah, if you're listening to the podcast on YouTube or Spotify, go to Apple and rate the podcast. You can give us 1 to 5 stars, write a review, give a comment, whatever you want to do. But do that. That helps us. Okay, so here's the first thing. First question. Last 3 books you read and what stood out?
Well, the last book I read was Shoe Dog.
Shoe Dog, yeah.
And of course, I went back and reread Robert Heinlein's Gloria Road.
Okay, great one.
On top of that. And
have you read Dune recently?
Not recently.
I saw you had it at the house. I didn't know if you'd gotten into it yet.
Decades.
They're making a movie on it, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I had a Devil Wears Prada moment because someone from our team was at the Grove, it was like a mall in our area, and they're like, we're going to Barnes and Nobles if you need anything, or Apple Store, and I was like, oh, can you go to the Barnes and Nobles across the street? Can you get me Ready Player 2, this sci-fi novel? And then I get a text from Tess, who's one of our producers and our teammates and also a good friend, part of our family. She's like, hey, Ready Player 2 doesn't come out till November 24th. And I was like, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. And I was mostly joking, but I was kind of in a spicy mode. And I think she just didn't respond. And then she called me later and was like, hey, we might have actually gotten you an early copy of this book, Ready Player 2. And if I did, that would be the book I read next.
Oh, and I have to mention a third book.
Okay, a third book.
Our friend Carrie Arcos has a brand new novel, first sci-fi novel called Skywatchers.
That's awesome.
It's
that's so
come
cool.
out in the next couple months.
This is her third book published.
Yes, it is. She's normally in that young adult genre.
YA genre, but this is her first sci-fi?
Sci-fi, and
really
her
exciting.
and I, for years, we've talked about how we love sci-fi, and so I'm so excited for her.
That's so exciting. And her husband's actually a lifelong friend of yours.
Yeah, David is amazing.
I grew up with him, kind of like a big brother.
Like your big brother. Yeah.
And I remember like I would grow up with him, and he lived with our family multiple times before he got married. And I would like eat cereal on Saturday mornings, and he would do push-ups, and I'd be like on his back while he was doing push-ups and watching cartoons and the whole thing.
So go to Amazon, pick up Skywatchers, Carrie Arcos.
Yes, Skywatchers, Carrie Arcos. It's going to be exciting.
Other questions.
Here's the next one from Russ. He asked a question about your personal life. I heard about Erwin's creative room. Would love to see pictures. Debatable. Hear more about it. Hear more about his writing process and routine. You also spelled here wrong, but we're not going to judge. Even how you both approach the spaces of your life to make them attractive, inviting for what you're wanting to achieve or experience. See, like this is such a great, it's like 3 lines, and it says it create such a great conversation.
Well, a couple of guys came over this week and helped me move all the stuff in my room again and again and again. It probably won't be the last time, so I keep rearranging it, moving around all the chaos in that room and creating a space that I enjoy writing in and creating in and playing in. So maybe one day we'll do a little tour.
No, it's such a cool room, and you have both like creative space, some fun space, some workspace,
two walls that are basically whiteboards where I can write and erase,
your books and stuff.
Ping pong and foosball table.
Yeah,
and
it's funny because it's not a big room, so you're like, how do I move all these things? I'm like, you just have to start getting rid of stuff.
And I can't.
You can't.
And everything has meaning in there.
Okay.
And so it's a combination of art,
yes,
and sports.
Yeah.
And creativity, imagination, all that pulled together.
And I'm really bad at decorating my house. So usually I ask a friend or someone else, and that's really just not my forte. I love aesthetics, but not in my own personal space for some reason. Yeah.
I have a lot of old graphic novels. I have a lot of old 33s, long play Beatle albums and stuff like that.
You have a ton of amazing classic comics.
Yeah.
Super cool. And like some cool sports paraphernalia that you've kind of acquired over the last, you got the LAFC golden shoes. They sent that to you for humanitarian work.
Beautiful award.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. He did one that I actually wanted to do a whole podcast on. Russ is great. Future of the church. This one I thought was really interesting. What do you guys see? I'm going to say the names because we love all these people. John Mark Comer, who I love, seems to kind of scoff at the whole digital is the future talk and seems to just want normal again. Michael Todd, who is also incredible, in podcasts is all this is in quotations, the future is digital and it changes everything and changes everything. Judah Smith is capitalizing on church home concept and closing buildings, etc. And of course, there's all sorts of approaches in between. Curious where you two land. I've listened many times to your podcasts back in February, emphasizing the importance of buildings in religion to mark permanence and thus the grievance over here to stay, not turning out as hoped. This is a parenthetical thought, I gave towards this and was so bummed by the way. During COVID, has your convictions on buildings and permanent spaces increased, lessened, or stayed the same?
Yeah.
There's a couple different things here.
There's a lot there.
So can we just address the future of the church first?
Sure.
Or whatever you want to do.
I want to work backwards because...
Always working backwards.
Yeah.
Here to stay.
The last question. Well, it's because I'm 62 years old, basically, and here in LA for 30 years, and I've never tried to buy property ever in the 30 years here as a church. And even before that, before I came to LA, buying property was never a value or a high priority for me. The only reason we tried to buy the property in Hollywood is its location on Hollywood Boulevard in La Brea, because it's in the heart of Hollywood and it's an iconic space. So I probably would say that if you look at the historical context, my peers would be like the Bill Hybels and Rick Warrens and Brian Houstons of the world. Those are the guys that were my age, my peers. They were all building centered. They bought massive buildings, have properties, and put a great amount of the church resource into properties. Yeah. I was probably the singular person of my generation with the amount of like influence and weight of a ministry that never bought property. Yeah. So trying to buy this property was not within my view of reality. It was a unique exception because of where it was and why we were doing it. And I think it's really important because sometimes we confuse a person's value systems with a particular strategy. The strategies can change, but it doesn't mean your value systems have to change over time. I think you said that John Mark Comer was saying that the future is not digital, and that's actually right. The present is digital.
Yeah, we are already digital.
Yeah, to say that the future isn't digital is to not be realistic about the present.
Right, because even how you are consuming this podcast in this moment is not analog. It is digital.
And everyone who's hearing him say the future is not digital is hearing it through a digital medium.
No one is in the room with him at the moment.
So the reality is that whether you like this reality or not, we live in a digital reality.
Yeah. We could go so deep down that trail of thought.
Right. And we tend to be bipolar in our views of the future. Just because it's digital doesn't mean it isn't going to be personal. And in fact, the more of something you get, the more value the opposite becomes. And I love the fact that you've pointed out that vinyl has become almost more valuable.
Yeah. I think vinyl is a great example of that, right? They said vinyl was going to die when the cassette tape and then the CD came out.
Yeah.
And then in reality, cassette and CDs have pretty much died.
Mm-hmm.
And vinyl is this thing that is so tactile and beautiful sounding that it has created its own subculture and has kind of like revitalized and had like a complete upswing in its popularity and its necessity to the music industry. But you can't take vinyl on a plane and listen to it while you're flying to, London or Mexico City or any of the places we're going. So you can't take it with you. So it is this idea that if you want to modernize, it's something that you said to Rob Bell 20 years ago, that if you want to be remembered, if you want to go down in history, if you want to be remembered, you have to write books. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you can't just think. It's not enough to just think and to speak. You actually have to put it down into writing. It's the same thing with this new era of digital. It's like it's not just enough to say it. You have to actually record it. You have to put it out there.
Yeah, and I think an interesting maybe side note would be, I don't think anyone thinks the NBA bubble is going to replace an actual NBA experience live.
No, what's their new branding? It's a whole new game.
A whole new game.
NBA. It's a whole new game.
But that's not even the analogy. So the analogy is not, will we ever go back to the Staples Center, or we will always watch virtually through the bubble? That's not the real comparison. The question is, why hasn't NBA, what is it, 2K or the video?
Right, NBA 2K.
Why hasn't NBA 2K replaced the NBA?
Right.
See, if the virtual is so much better than the reality, then the virtual game should have already replaced sports, but it doesn't, because we humans are still textured, where we need human contact, human interaction, and the reality of the experience.
Digital is an amplification of the analog, right?
Yeah.
Digital records, it collects, and then it amplifies.
Mm-hmm. And then I think Mike Todd, who has just absolutely
just changed the game in that
he's done such
regard.
a great job. His book on relationships has exploded, #1
His
bestseller.
talks explode.
And you know what? I don't even know Mike Todd. I just
no, you did. Did you met him? Did you meet him? I met him, and I didn't know who he was, and he was the kindest person.
I'm just saying I don't know him, personally.
Right.
But everything
awesome.
I've seen about him, he's the warmest, kindest, most authentic, beautiful human being. So,
and I would say he genuinely is.
Yeah, I'm so glad for his success.
Yeah.
But I think he's somewhere in the Midwest.
He is he in Tulsa?
I think he's in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And for him to have the level of impact that his gifting and talent and message is going to have, his world is digital.
Yeah, because because it is in Tulsa.
Tulsa's too small.
I'm sure the people of Tulsa are amazing.
Yeah, but it's too small for the level of impact he's going to have. And so the world is digital for him already, because that's the world he's actually reaching.
So now here's an interesting question, right? Because you came to LA because it really was the melting pot and is, I still believe, the future of the world.
LA was the epicenter of humanity's future.
It was kind of pre-digital.
Yeah.
Pre the internet.
Absolutely.
Would that change? And the only reason Mike Todd can well, one, if God's in your life, it doesn't matter where you are. I think that's the greatest example. It's like you can be in Tulsa and God's still going to use you to build something massive. Where would you go now? Because it doesn't matter where you are.
That would go the other way. His digital platform exists because he has a great local church that platforms
him. And right.
And that's why it's like you can't go to either extreme. Like
you can't go to a cave in the middle of nowhere and expect to have the same kind of influence.
Well, you can, but it will probably not work out for you the way that you hoped.
Right.
And because one, your messaging won't be as relevant. See, a part of the reason I know what to say to millions of people across the world is that I'm actually interacting with people one-on-one, 1-on-5, 1-on-10 in real life. What I'm learning in the context of real life, not digital life. See, what I'm sharing digitally, I'm learning in reality.
And I think that is more of like a golden moment than I think most people who are listening may even realize. If you're wondering how he communicates the way he communicates, is the fact that he's only really amplifying conversations he's already had and then insights he has gained since having that conversation.
Yeah.
And then you're letting everyone, you're turning a light on it, you're opening it up to everyone, and you're going, okay, look, this is this conversation that I've held in my head for the last like week or two or months or years.
So I will say one beautiful thing about the church that I'm excited about. The church is usually so far behind in technology that usually the technology is becoming antiquated by the time we're actually catching on.
Yeah, and I think,
But all these great young leaders, they grew up in the digital age, so they're capturing technology at the same time on the forefront. And it's going to allow the message of Jesus and the truths of the scriptures and to get to the world in a really relevant way.
And I do think Judah Smith's interesting because everyone was criticizing him, selling his buildings, doing XYZ, changing staff up, or whatever he was doing. The murmurs, the rumors, the what was going on underneath the surface, or what was going on. And then you have quarantine, and the crazy person looks like the genius. And I think that's a great example of like that's the moment where he's like, whatever was behind it, something in the madness of it all prepared him for the moment that is now. You know, whether the app is a wild success or not, he's positioned and postured himself in a way to be forward thinking enough.
Right. And
now it can only pick up because anyone who's complaining about church, which I don't think Seattle people complain about not going to church because they barely go to church anyways. So we have a church in Seattle and that's a whole thing. Right. And we love you, all of you, every single one of you. Shout out to the Seattle people. but it's like the Seahawks play, they don't show up.
Yeah.
So you deal with that with your whole life. You got to put it on.
Everybody shows up to the Seahawks.
You know what I'm saying? If the Seahawks are playing, you don't show up to church.
Yes, that's right.
So you
show up for the game. You don't show up for church.
If the sun comes outside, you don't show up to church.
And I guarantee you, the Seahawks fans will never accept a digital replacement long term. The moment they can fill that stadium, they're going to be the 12th man. 100%. And maybe the church is supposed to be the 12th man. We're supposed to want to be in the room because we know we make a difference.
But do you think sometimes we tire ourselves out by doing 52 weeks of church a year, where it makes it a little less special? Because honestly, I don't like baseball because of how many games there are. But I love the playoffs because I know it's limited and it's high pressure and it's
the NBA has 82 games and we only have 52 Sundays. So I don't know if it's overkill yet.
But the first 25 of them are trash. They're terrible and they're not competitive and you have to leave. This is your heart out. Okay. So with that, I think the future of the church is going to be okay. But I do think we need Mark Comer and we need Judah Smith and we need Mike Todd. And we need that kid who's going to go I can't get a building, I can't get anyone to lease me a space, but I can maybe build an app or program a website and go I can get a message out to people and tell what I know in my heart.
Well, I'm just glad I'm alive in a moment where we can have one conversation that could spread to millions, if not billions of people across the world. If you had had this conversation 100 years ago, people would have thought we were drowning in madness.
Yeah.
And yet here we are in this moment where we can make a difference and we can do a podcast together.
If you had told people that the internet was going to exist 150 years ago, they would have thought this was witchcraft. They would have burned us at the stake. Yeah,
and that's right. And yet just the turn of this century has changed everything. What I do know is the church is resilient. And if this planet is the bubble, the church has the ability to overcome whatever we face and thrive in the middle of all the chaos.
The future of the church is bright.
Yeah. Hey, I love doing this with you.
Love doing this with you.
All right.
And also shout out to Russ and everybody who shot out emails and wrote some stuff, and we're grateful for you.
All right. And then, everyone mentioned, go pick up Mike Todd's book, go pick up Chad Veach's book, go pick up Judah Smith's book.
And John Mark Comer's book.
Go pick up Mark Comer's book. Go pick up Carrie Arcus's book. Whenever we talk about anyone, we want to just give them a shout out because we are for everyone on the team.
It's not for everyone, but most people. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
That's why it's so much fun doing this with you.
No, it is. It really is. No, but even all of them, you could not name 5 different, more different people, and that's the kind of the beauty of this world. And you need them all. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.